Hi, good morning everyone. I'd just like to start by thanking all of you for coming today. This really is actually my worst nightmare. I just said it on the way here that I have to do this, but I'm doing it for Emily and no other reason. So if I'm a bit emotional, please understand. I want to start by thanking all of you for coming here today. A special thank you to Lord Pollock for your words, and most importantly, for continuing to do everything you can to fight for the hostages. My name is Emily Damari. I was born in Surrey and raised in Beckenham, Kent. In my 20s, I travelled to Israel, fell in love with a wonderful man, and together we raised our British Israeli family on a little cooperative village, a kibbutz called Kfar Aza, where I worked as a kindergarten teacher. And I raised Emily, my youngest child and my only daughter, to love her British roots. Along with being a massive Spurs fan who enjoyed having a pint or two, she had a great British sense of humour, and her house on the kibbutz was always a place where her friends would drop by for a cup of tea. At least they did until the 7th of October 2023. When Hamas invaded Kfar Aza that morning, my life was saved by a lock that jammed, preventing the terrorists from entering my safe room to kill or kidnap me like they did to so many of my friends and neighbours. While I was fortunate to survive, 64 were murdered on my kibbutz and 19 were kidnapped, including Emily, by Hamas from her own home, which is nearby to mine. Emily was shot in the hand, injured by shrapnel in her leg, blindfolded, bundled into the back of her own car and driven back to Gaza. 426 days later, and she is the last remaining British hostage being held hostage by Hamas. I do know that Emily was alive as of around 8 months ago, and despite the long silence, I believe that she is still with us today. But as I have said before, every day is a death sentence for her in Gaza. Her situation is dire and she desperately needs to be released, along with every other remaining hostage. From what we do know, the hostages have been hidden down in Hamas's terror tunnels in the networks and are being held in shocking conditions without any shred of compassion or mercy. Any number of causes could kill Emily: disease, starvation, dehydration, torture, execution, or even friendly fire. I'm also terrified that Emily and the other female hostages are exposed to the constant threat of sexual assault. Hamas has a record of using rape as a weapon of war against women that must be condemned in every corner of the world. And the list of horrors goes on and on. In Israel, I spent my time campaigning for a ceasefire deal that would see the hostages come home. I hope and pray that we can bring this war to an end and that everyone's suffering can end along with it. Nobody wants peace more than I do. But this week I came to Britain with a different message, and my message is this: a hostage deal may be weeks, months, or even further away. Meanwhile, their condition deteriorates every single hour. Much more needs to be done, and much more can be done to keep Emily and the other hostages alive while they remain in captivity. Otherwise, they will all die the most painful and tragic deaths imaginable in the tunnels. Many already have, and words alone will not save those who still remain. For 14 months, Hamas has consistently blocked the hostages from accessing any of the humanitarian aid that is coming into Gaza. Emily and those with her will be in dire need of nutritious food, clean water, fresh clothes that can keep them warm in the water, sanitary supplies and medicine. That is the bare minimum. Britain has taken a central role in getting aid into Gaza, which I fully support, but some of that aid must finally reach my daughter and the other hostages. It's a disaster that no solution has been found for in this situation. The hostages themselves are fighting tooth and nail to stay alive. They cannot survive a second winter with only our thoughts and prayers. The last time that a major aid initiative was attempted specifically for the hostages was in January. It is long overdue that efforts like these are renewed, prioritised and sustained until they succeed. During my visit this week, I have met a number of people from both the government and the opposition who agreed that more can and must be done along those lines. In addition to Lord Pollock here, I want specifically to thank Lord Tariq Ahmed, Nigel Farage, Matthew Patrick, John Pearce, Priti Patel, Baroness Fox, Baroness Foster, and all the other parliamentarians who are all immediately looked to what they could do within their powers to move this issue forward. I'd also like to thank my family and my friends for all the support that they've given me through this time. I don't know what I would have been able to do without them. And I'd also want to thank the Prime Minister, Kemi Badenoch and Ed Davey for all talking about Emily during Prime Minister's questions today, and for the many MPs, lords and officials who have taken the time to meet with me and the other British-linked hostage families this week. Seeing the yellow ribbon on people's lapels in Parliament and hearing Spurs fans chanting Emily's name gives me hope, and I pray that all of this goodwill can translate into concrete action. I was heartened when I saw that the Prime Minister Starmer raised Emily's plight with His Majesty the Emir of Qatar in their meeting yesterday. While a planned meeting between myself and the Prime Minister of Qatar unfortunately never materialised, I've had several positive interactions with the Qatari government and their negotiators in the past year, and hope to hear news of British-Qatari cooperation on getting aid to the hostages and of course bringing them home. Regrettably, not all of my experiences this week have generated positive momentum. On Monday, I spoke at the annual Labour Friends of Israel event in front of around 100 Labour MPs, including the Foreign Secretary. I used my time to specifically and repeatedly ask for action on the hostage aid situation, and I had estimated that my call to action had been well received. A few hours after my speech, however, the Foreign Secretary published a statement on the need for Israel to allow more aid into Gaza for the winter, but there was no mention of the need to get any of that aid to Emily and the other hostages, and no additional remarks have been made on the subject since then. I appreciate the Foreign Secretary's warmth in our personal meetings, but as I have said, I came for solutions, not sympathy. I also used my LFI speech to urge the government to no longer vote in favour of UN resolutions that call for an unconditional ceasefire in Gaza as they did last month. An unconditional ceasefire puts the hostages in even greater danger than they are already in. If Hamas thinks that it can get what it wants without releasing the hostages, then it will simply kill them or treat them in even more depraved and inhumane ways. The only unconditional and immediate call for action must be for Hamas to release all of the hostages. If they come home today, then the war will finally be over. On that note, I was relieved to hear the Prime Minister say that Britain's position is that the hostages must come home and for there to be a ceasefire worthy of the name. I hope that future votes at the UN reflect this position and that Britain will continue to work to convince other countries to adopt this approach as well. Outside of Parliament, I want to once again thank the British public for keeping Emily in your hearts and not letting her or the other 100 hostages fade from view. When we stop saying their names, seeing their faces and calling for action, then that is when all hope is truly lost. For me, the hostages are a human issue first and foremost. Supporting the hostages, supporting Emily, it does not make you pro one side or another side. Dehumanizing people instead of empathizing with them only brings more conflict, more pain, and more tragedy into the world. And for me, it is especially important that Emily's name is still said in Britain, that her face still appears on posters up and down the country, and that there are people here who want to see action taken that will save her life and bring her home. I am overwhelmed and so deeply grateful to the hundreds of people who I don't even know, who are creating posters and stickers and chanting Emily's names at football matches and sharing her story on social media. Emily and I loved coming to London together around Christmas time and seeing all the lights go up with her, and without her here, it's another painful reminder of what I've lost. But I want to thank you all for helping me believe that she will make it back from hell, and that next Christmas season we can come back to London together. Thank you.
So, Mandy, as I said at the beginning, no politician, no diplomat can do it any better. You're a mum, and we want Emily home. There were 2 or 3 questions that were sent in, which I will deal with first, and then perhaps if there are any desperately important questions that people want to ask, that's fine. But I will reiterate that whilst Mandy has made a statement, there will be she won't be dealing with any political questions in terms of governments here or in Israel or anywhere else. She's made a statement, and I hope you will respect that. Daniel Carrier, who is from the Jewish Telegraph, asked if you could speak to Emily's captors now, what is it you would say to them?
I want her to be treated with dignity and with respect, and if she's thirsty, give her something to eat and to drink, and if she's hungry, to give her something to eat, and just keep her alive until she can come home. That's all I want her to do.
Okay. Nick Barker from The Sun asked, what, if any, proof of life, although you dealt a little bit this in your statement, information have you received from Gaza so far, and do you know anything about the conditions that she's being kept in?
I've received, information about Emily from the Israeli government, and from the hostages that came back. There's very little information being received at the moment. I knew last year that she was still alive, and that's all.
I remember you saying about that when some of the hostages that did come home talked about the spirit that Emily had that kept everybody else going. Did that give you a little bit of hope that she was as normal as can be?
Well, in November when they came back, she still had a spirit, but that was more than a year ago. And what's happened since then, I've got no idea. She was supporting them. She was helping them. She was helping them survive. But that was a year ago, and I've had no news of what she's like now, so I don't know.
Charlie Peters of GB News asked a question which is politics, but do you trust the Labour government to fight Emily's case, given their disagreements with Israel, is the question.
I'm not a politician. All I ask from the government, it doesn't matter if it's Labour, Tory, Lib Dems, it doesn't matter. All I want from our government is to do as much as possible to get Emily home.
And he even reformed it.
And reform.
Nigel Farage gave you some time.
Yes, thank you, Nigel. He made an amazing statement. Really, that was very strong. And he said he would talk to the incoming president for the United States. So I am very grateful for that very strong statement he made.
We understand he has quite a hotline. Ellie Grant of the Jewish Chronicle asked, could you share your, it's another politics, could you share your views on Keir Starmer and whether Nigel Farage is right in saying the government is not doing enough? I don't think you've answered that, so I don't think we need to go on. Now, I will open it up, but I repeat that it needs to be about Emily. So does anybody want to ask a question? Please tell us who you are.
It's Leon from Sky News. You've spoken powerfully about your daughter still being held more than a year after those attacks. Israel says its priority is destroying Hamas and securing the hostages release, of which Emily is one. But they've also been accused today of a major international human rights organisation, Amnesty, of committing genocide. So what's your take on how Israel has carried out the war so far?
I didn't hear that news, but I can say that I went to Geneva last week and I spoke to the Human Rights Commission, and I've spoken several times to the president of the Red Cross, the ICRC, and they all agree that what's happening in Gaza to the hostages is a war crime. They're not getting any treatment there, they're not getting any humanitarian aid, and that's what interests me. Again, you're talking about decisions that are above my head. I don't know. I always say it's a question. Emily is not getting out because she is a pawn in a political game for power and ego and money, and so I'm not interested in politics. I don't, they can say one thing, somebody else can say one thing. All I'm interested in is that Emily gets released, and she shouldn't be held there in Gaza in the conditions that she's being held in.
And I would add, on the Amnesty report, which I haven't read yet, I'd be interested to know on which page of the Amnesty report Emily's name is. Next question, sir. Who are you?
I'm Jonathan Sachdotti. Have you had any dealings with the International Red Cross, and what has been their position in trying to get aid?
I just answered that. I've seen them several times in Geneva, in Israel. I've spoken to them. They say they can't get humanitarian aid into Emily for their own reasons. So,
Johnny.
Johnny, thank you. Have you had any soft power approach with Tottenham Hotspur? Have you spoken to the club? Maybe they can post something which reaches other places that other international organisations cannot.
well, I would love them to do that. Emily's supported Tottenham all her life, my whole family, except for me, I'm a Crystal Palace supporter, who did actually make a statement on the 7th, about the 7th of October, supporting the hostages. So I would love them to do that. At the moment, it's just the Tottenham supporters who stand outside the arena and support her. But I would love them to do that because she loves Spurs so much. She watched them on TV all the time.
Thank you. Brilliant. If there's no other questions, I'd like to thank you all for coming, and I hope you will join me in praying for Emily's release as soon as possible. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be great.